In today's stories, we're looking at the 5 worst shark attacks, from a spearfisherman who chased a grouper into a predator's hunting ground to a surfer who ignored every warning sign on the beach. But first, we begin off the coast of South Africa, where a young diver was already dead. She just didn't know it yet. It was July 14th, 2016, and the southern Atlantic churned under heavy gray skies along the western Cape coast of South Africa. The water temperature had dropped into the low 50s, and the seasonal concentration of prey species had drawn massive aggregations of marine life toward the coastline. Cape fur seal colonies along the offshore islands were at peak population. Hundreds of animals hauled out on rocky platforms and porpoising through the shallows, and with them came the predators that had patrolled these waters since before human memory. Cerise Viljoen was a 24-year-old marine biology student at the University of Cape Town, entering the final year of her degree. She had grown up in the coastal suburb of Muizenberg, where the ocean had shaped her childhood and eventually her career ambitions. Her academic focus centered on elasmobranch ecology, and she had spent the previous semester cataloging shark movement data from tagged animals along the Western Cape. But her open water experience remained limited to supervised university dives in controlled environments. She had never been in open water near a seal colony. The operation she booked was run by Dolf Grayling, a 51-year-old former commercial fisherman who had shifted into wildlife tourism 3 years earlier. Grayling operated from a converted fishing vessel, running unlicensed in-water snorkeling excursions near seal colonies at rates that undercut legitimate operators by half. His business lacked several required safety certifications, and he routinely placed swimmers in the water within prohibited proximity of seal islands. He did not use the protective cage systems that legitimate operators employed as standard equipment. That morning, Grayling brought 6 clients to a site within prohibited proximity of a known seal colony. The water was thick with particulate, visibility often dropping below 10 feet in the plankton blooms stirred up by winter swells. A low cloud ceiling darkened the surface further. Viljoen entered the water with 3 other clients. The overcast conditions and murky water meant her silhouette was backlit against the brighter surface above, a dark, irregular shape suspended between the boat and the seal colony. From depth in the reduced visibility, the profile could resemble a seal from below. Great white sharks are the largest predatory shark species on Earth, with adults commonly reaching lengths of 15 to 20 feet and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds. Their hunting strategy near seal colonies relies on high-speed vertical ambush attacks launched from depth, striking prey silhouetted against the surface. Great whites possess rows of serrated, triangular teeth engineered to shear through flesh and blubber in a single pass. In cases of mistaken identity, where a shark strikes a human rather than its intended prey, the animal typically delivers a single exploratory bite and disengages upon encountering an unfamiliar body composition. However, a single bite from a mature great white can sever major arteries and cause massive tissue damage. Even brief contact can prove fatal within minutes. The strike came from directly below. The shark hit Viljoen with enough force to jolt her partially upward in the water, its jaws clamping around her left thigh and hip in a single explosive motion before releasing almost immediately. The entire contact lasted less than 2 seconds. The shark did not return. It disappeared into the dark water as quickly as it had come, a single devastating bite after which the shark disengaged, having determined it was not typical prey. But the damage was catastrophic. The bite had severed major arteries in the upper leg and sheared through deep muscle tissue across her thigh and hip. Blood poured into the water at a rate unlikely to be survivable without immediate advanced care. The other swimmers scrambled toward the boat as the water around Viljoen darkened. Grayling and a deckhand pulled her aboard within roughly a minute or 2 of the strike, but she had already lost consciousness. Efforts to control the bleeding proved futile. Viljoen was unresponsive before the vessel reached the harbor and was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the nearest medical facility. The investigation found that Grayling had been operating without proper permits and placing swimmers directly in the water near an active seal colony for over a year. The combination of peak predator season, absence of caging, and reduced visibility had created conditions strongly associated with mistaken identity strikes. Grayling's operating license was permanently revoked, and he faced regulatory penalties and potential criminal liability. While the cold Atlantic waters off the Western Cape had claimed Cerise Viljoen in a matter of minutes, thousands of miles away in the South Pacific, a far more patient predator was about to turn a routine spearfishing dive into a disappearance that would take investigators days to piece together. It was March 8, 2014, and the sun hung low over the Tuamotu archipelago of French Polynesia, casting amber light across the shallow lagoon of a remote coral atoll. The dry season had brought calm seas and exceptional water clarity to the outer reef, drawing both fish and fishermen to the deep passes where tidal currents funneled nutrients between the open ocean and the lagoon interior. Tawanui Mahitu was a 34-year-old spearfisherman from a small village on the atoll's northern shore, a man who had grown up free-diving the reefs and passes since childhood. Spearfishing was both livelihood and identity for Mahitu, who supplied reef fish to the village and for a small-scale sale to markets in Papeete. He was one of the most capable freedivers on the atoll, routinely working depths of 60 feet and reaching 80 on his deeper dives. That afternoon, Mahitu departed alone in his outrigger canoe for a deep pass on the atoll's western side, where he had been targeting large grouper over the previous week. He carried a single spear gun, a dive knife, and a float line attached to a surface buoy. His wife, Haranui, expected him back before dark. The pass dropped to approximately 70 feet at its deepest point, with strong tidal currents pulling nutrient-rich water toward the open ocean. These currents attracted schools of reef fish, which in turn drew larger predators during the transitional hours around dawn and dusk. Every spearfisherman on the atoll understood that the passes grew dangerous as light faded, but the late afternoon current also brought the largest fish into range. According to the reconstruction that investigators assembled over the following days, Mahitu had anchored his canoe near the mouth of the pass and entered the water sometime in the mid to late afternoon. His float buoy was later recovered approximately 300 yards from the canoe, drifting in the outgoing current. The spear gun was recovered by local divers from the seafloor at a depth of 65 feet, its shooting line deployed. The remaining portion of a grouper was found nearby on the reef, still attached to a severed section of float line. The damage to the fish was consistent with a large shark having torn it from the line. Tiger sharks are among the most versatile and dangerous predators in tropical waters, with adults commonly reaching 12 to 14 feet in length and weights between 850 and 1,400 pounds. Often called the garbage cans of the sea, tiger sharks are indiscriminate feeders known to consume fish, sea turtles, birds, marine mammals, and carrion. They are particularly attracted to the vibrations and blood trails produced by spearfishing activity, and competition over speared fish is a well-documented trigger for dangerous encounters. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks do not rely on a single ambush strike. They are persistent hunters, capable of circling, investigating, and attacking multiple times. Their broad, heavily serrated teeth are designed for shearing rather than puncturing, capable of cutting through bone, shell, and cartilage with equal efficiency. What happened beneath the surface of the pass that afternoon was never directly witnessed. Based on the physical evidence, investigators concluded that Mahitu had speared a large grouper at depth and was ascending with the catch when a tiger shark, likely attracted by the struggling fish and the blood dispersing in the current, was drawn to the catch and engaged with the line. The severed float line and damage to the grouper indicated the shark had struck the catch first. Whether the subsequent attack on Mahitu was immediate or followed a period of circling could not be determined. The strong tidal currents flowing through the pass would have dispersed blood and organic material within minutes, carrying evidence into open water and making detailed scene reconstruction nearly impossible. Mahitu did not return by nightfall. Haranui raised the alarm, and a search party launched at first light. His canoe was later found drifting, its anchor line no longer holding. The float buoy, spear gun, and damaged catch were recovered over the course of the day, scattered across a dispersed area of the pass. Despite an extensive search of the surrounding reef and pass, only fragments of Mahitu's wetsuit and dive belt were ever found. The currents and scavenging activity in the pass had erased nearly everything else. Authorities concluded that Mahitu had died as a result of a shark attack during a spearfishing dive, the damage patterns consistent with a large shark, believed to involve a tiger shark, based on regional prevalence. While the warm passes of the Tuamotu archipelago had swallowed Tawanui Mahitu without a trace, the murky tidal rivers of northern Australia were about to deliver an attack so sudden that the only witness would spend the rest of his life trying to make sense of what he saw. It was November 23, 2015, and the first storms of the wet season had swept across the coast of far north Queensland, dumping heavy rain across the river catchments that fed into the Coral Sea. The flooding had pushed walls of brown water downstream, swelling tidal creeks and river mouths with silt-heavy runoff that reduced underwater visibility to absolute zero. the floodwaters also carried something else. Bull sharks, already present in the river systems, became more active in the changing conditions. Warwick Cadzo was a 40-year-old commercial crab fisherman who had worked the tidal rivers and estuaries north of Cairns for over 15 years. He operated a small aluminum dinghy, running lines of baited crab pots along the river mouths and mangrove channels where mud crabs concentrated. The work required wading into shallow water to set and retrieve pots, a task Cadzo performed daily without giving it much thought. He had seen bull sharks in the rivers before, but regarded them as a known but normalized risk. His deckhand, Leith Margetts, 27, had worked with Cadzo for 2 seasons. That morning, they launched before dawn to check a line of 12 pots set along a mangrove-fringed river mouth. The water was the color of coffee, tannin-stained and heavy with silt from the recent rains. Visibility beneath the surface was zero. The tide was rising, pushing salt water upstream and creating the brackish mixing zone that bull sharks favor. Cadzo had noted the conditions, but pressed ahead. Lost days meant lost income. Bull sharks are widely considered the most dangerous shark species in shallow coastal and riverine environments. Adults reach lengths of 7 to 11 feet and weights between 200 and 500 pounds. Unlike most shark species, bull sharks tolerate fresh and brackish water, regularly entering rivers, estuaries, and tidal creeks to feed. They are aggressive and frequently implicated in attacks in murky, shallow water where visibility is poor and escape routes are limited. Their attack pattern in low visibility conditions is explosive and brief, a single high-speed strike aimed at disabling prey, followed by rapid disengagement or a secondary bite if resistance continues. Their serrated teeth and powerful jaws generate enough force to sever limbs and rupture major blood vessels in a single pass. Cadzo stepped off the dinghy into waist-deep water at the river mouth, wading toward the first pot marker approximately 20 feet from the boat. Margetts was sorting gear on the dinghy with his back partially turned. According to his later testimony, the first thing he registered was a violent eruption of water and a sound he described as a heavy, wet impact followed immediately by thrashing. He turned to see Cadzo struggling in churning brown water that was rapidly turning dark. The attack had come without any visible warning. No fin, no wake. No disturbance in the opaque water before the strike. Margetts froze for several seconds, unable to process what was happening. By the time he grabbed a gaff and moved toward the bow, the thrashing had already subsided. The water around Cadzo had gone still, except for a spreading stain of dark red drifting downstream with the current. The entire event, from initial strike to silence, had lasted only a few seconds before the water went still. Margetts pulled alongside and managed to drag Cadzo onto the dinghy. The damage to his lower left leg was catastrophic, with massive tissue loss and severed blood vessels consistent with a single devastating bite from a large bull shark. Cadzo was unresponsive with catastrophic blood loss. Margetts radioed for emergency assistance while attempting to control the bleeding, but the remote location meant paramedics did not reach the scene for over 40 minutes. Warwick Cadzo was pronounced dead on the riverbank. The investigation confirmed a bull shark attack in conditions that officials described as extremely high risk, noting that the post-flood water conditions had concentrated bull sharks in the same tidal zones where commercial fishermen routinely worked on foot. While the brown rivers of Queensland had killed Warwick Cadzo in seconds, the deep blue waters of the Red Sea were about to stage a far slower and more terrifying encounter, one where the predator took its time. It was September 21, 2017, and the Red Sea shimmered under a cloudless sky off the coast of southern Egypt. A local dive operation ran daily boat excursions to offshore reef sites, where drift dives along deep walls offered encounters with pelagic species that rarely appeared closer to shore. Velizar Radev was a 29-year-old dive instructor from Plovdiv, Bulgaria, who had relocated to Egypt 2 years earlier. Radev held advanced certifications and had logged over 2,000 dives across the Mediterranean, Red Sea, and Southeast Asia. He served as a senior guide responsible for leading open water excursions and managing client safety during drift dives along the deeper reef systems. The afternoon excursion carried Radev and 4 clients to a reef site approximately 8 miles offshore. The dive boat, captained by Ashraf Gabala, 43, would drop the group at the northern end of a wall and collect them at a designated exit point roughly half a mile south. The plan was routine. The dive proceeded normally for approximately 35 minutes before the group ascended at the exit point. Radev had deployed a delayed surface marker buoy during ascent, but the current and the boat's engine failure had carried the vessel out of position. The group surfaced into open water with no vessel in sight and over 200 feet of blue water beneath them. A commercial fishing vessel had been operating nearby that morning, and traces of bait and fish waste drifted through the area. Radev gathered the group at the surface and deployed an inflatable signal marker. He instructed the clients to stay close together in a tight formation, fins inward, minimizing their profile. The group floated in the open ocean and waited. Oceanic white-tip sharks are among the most dangerous open-water predators encountered by humans, associated with several historical open-water incidents involving survivors adrift in tropical oceans. Adults reach lengths of 10 to 13 feet and weights approaching 370 pounds. Unlike reef-associated species that strike quickly and retreat, oceanic white-tips are persistent, methodical investigators. They approach slowly, circling at distance before closing gradually, investigating potential targets with gentle bumps before escalating to exploratory bites. Their broad, rounded, first dorsal fin and long white-tipped pectoral fins make them unmistakable. White-tips are solitary and bold, often not deterred by human presence, and they are drawn to irregular surface activity, splashing, and the scent of blood or organic material in the water. Attacks typically follow a prolonged investigation period that can persist for extended periods. The first sign appeared within 20 minutes of the group surfacing. Radev spotted the distinctive white-tipped dorsal fin circling at a distance of roughly 50 yards. The shark was large, an estimated 10 feet, moving in slow, wide arcs. Radev maintained the tight formation and instructed the clients to keep still, avoid splashing, and remain facing the animal. Over the following 40 minutes, the shark tightened its circles steadily, from 50 yards to 30, then 15. It made several close passes, its pectoral fins nearly brushing the diver's fins. On at least 2 occasions, it bumped a client's leg with its snout. Radev maintained eye contact with the animal and, when it came too close, attempted occasional defensive contact against its snout. In some instances, it veered away briefly before resuming its orbit. Approaching an hour in the water, the boat appeared on the horizon. Gabala had repaired the engine and was approaching at speed. As the group began swimming toward the vessel, the tight formation broke apart. Radev, who had been positioning himself between the shark and the clients throughout, found himself several yards behind as the others reached the swim platform. The shark, which had been circling at distance during the boat's approach, moved in decisively. It struck Radev from behind as he turned toward the swim platform, its jaws closing around his lower leg just below the knee. The serrated teeth sheared through muscle and severed major arteries in the lower leg. Radev was briefly pulled downward before resurfacing. Gabala and a deckhand dragged him onto the platform. Within seconds, but severe arterial bleeding was difficult to control with onboard first aid. Radev lost consciousness during the high-speed return to port. He was pronounced dead before the vessel reached the harbor. The investigation noted the engine failure as a major contributing factor that placed the group in open water without boat support, compounded by residual fishing activity nearby that may have contributed to attracting the oceanic white-tip into the area. While the open waters of the Red Sea had taken Velazar Radev after an hour of mounting dread, the turbid shallows of the Indian Ocean were about to deliver an attack so swift that the victim would never see it coming. It was May 6, 2013, and a light onshore breeze carried the smell of wet earth and river sediment across the western coastline of Réunion Island, a small French overseas territory in the Indian Ocean east of Madagascar. The overnight rains had sent plumes of brown runoff streaming from the island's steep, volcanic interior into the ocean, carrying nutrients and organic matter that spread a murky haze across the nearshore waters. The turbid conditions drew bait fish close to the river mouths, and behind them, larger predators. Cassien Dubreuil was a 22-year-old surfer from Lyon, France, who had traveled to Réunion 3 weeks earlier as part of a gap year. Dubreuil had been surfing since the age of 14 and considered himself competent in moderate conditions, though his experience was largely confined to the well-patrolled beaches of the French Atlantic coast and the warm, clear waters of Southeast Asia. Réunion's coastline was different. The island lacked the protective barrier reef systems that shielded neighboring Mauritius, meaning deep oceanic water reached close to shore. The volcanic seafloor dropped steeply, creating conditions where large sharks could hunt within yards of the lineup. The island had experienced a sharp increase in shark encounters over the preceding 3 years, prompting authorities to post warning signs at several popular surf breaks and implement seasonal swimming restrictions. Multiple serious and fatal attacks had made Réunion one of the most statistically dangerous surfing regions during that period. Dubreuil had been warned. Wilfried Dejoux, a 58-year-old surf shop owner near Saint-Gilles, had spoken with Dubreuil when he came in to rent a board several days earlier. Dejoux had pointed out the posted warnings and told him which breaks locals had abandoned, particularly during rain and runoff when visibility dropped to nothing. Dubreuil had listened, but expressed confidence that the conditions looked manageable. On the morning of the attack, Dubreuil paddled out alone at a break roughly a mile south of Saint-Gilles. The spot was known among locals for its consistent swell, but had been largely abandoned by resident surfers due to its proximity to a river mouth that discharged directly into the lineup after rain. The water was brown and opaque from the previous night's runoff. The early morning light was flat and low, and visibility beneath the surface was reduced to near zero. No other surfers were in the water. Tiger sharks are powerful, broad-bodied predators that thrive in warm, turbid coastal waters, reaching lengths of 12 to 14 feet and weights approaching 1,400 pounds. They are the species commonly implicated in fatal attacks around Réunion, where the combination of murky water, steep nearshore bathymetry, and abundant prey creates ideal hunting conditions. Tiger sharks attack from below or behind, using low visibility conditions to approach undetected before delivering a single catastrophic bite with their distinctively shaped, heavily serrated teeth. These teeth are designed to shear through large prey, including sea turtles and marine mammals, and can inflict massive tissue destruction in a single pass. In turbid water, a surfer's silhouette on the surface can resemble common prey such as turtles. Two surfers watching from shore were the only witnesses. According to their accounts, the attack happened without any visible warning. One moment, Dubreuil was sitting on his board in the lineup. The next, the water broke violently beneath him. The shark struck from directly below, its momentum carrying both predator and victim partially above the surface before crashing back down. The impact knocked Dubreuil from his board. The water around him immediately turned dark. There was no prolonged struggle. The disturbance subsided quickly. His board, severed leash still attached, washed ashore shortly afterward with a large curved section missing from the tail, consistent with a large shark. Emergency services launched a water search within 30 minutes. Partial remains were recovered later that day, or the following day, in shallow water south of the break. The injuries consistent with a single massive bite to the torso that likely caused rapid incapacitation. Investigation noted that he had entered the water alone at a break with posted shark warnings during peak risk conditions of low visibility, river runoff, and low-angle morning light. The incident prompted further restrictions in the area.